This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Madagascar braces for a humanitarian crisis as cyclone Batsirai bears down on the Indian Ocean island. Coups, climate change and the pandemic. African leaders seek a coordinated solution as the African Union summit kicks off in Addis Ababa. And President Xi Jinping hosts a banquet in the Chinese capital for dignitaries who attended the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympics. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. Ahead in sports, Tanzanians joined the celebration to mark the start of the Beijing 2022 Winter Games in China. Let's begin in Madagascar, where aid agencies are preparing for a major humanitarian crisis as tropical cyclone Batsirai heads towards the Indian Ocean island. The cyclone is expected to make landfall on Saturday. Satellite images taken on Friday show a cyclone Batsirai bearing down on Madagascar less than 2 weeks after Storm Anna killed at least 58 people there. The UN says up to 600,000 people will be affected by the cyclone. Authorities have closed schools and asked people not to go to work on Saturday. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the UN and aid organizations are ramping up their preparedness, placing rescue aircraft on standby and stockpiling more humanitarian supplies.
We anticipate a significant humanitarian impact in Madagascar, including in areas that are still recovering from Tropical Storm Anna in late January. Madagascar was already hit by Tropical Storm Anna, which brought winds, heavy rains, destruction and loss of life. More than 130,000 people were affected across Madagascar, including over 70,000 people who were displaced. At least 58 people have died, almost all of them in the capital, where traditional houses collapsed and others were swept away by landslides.
Meanwhile, residents of Madagascar's capital, Antananarivo, placed bricks and rocks on their roofs on Friday in preparation for tropical cyclone Batsirai's landing. According to a spokesperson of the World Meteorological Organization, Batsirai could intensify from a Category 3 to Category 4 equivalent before making landfall in eastern Madagascar on Saturday. The region has been repeatedly struck by severe storm and cyclones in recent years, destroying homes, infrastructure and crops and displacing large numbers of people. Experts say storms are becoming stronger and more frequent as waters warm due to climate change, with rising sea levels also making low-lying coastal areas vulnerable.
We are afraid of the increase in the price of basic necessities, especially during the cyclone period. That's why we have stocked up on food, so that we don't leave the house.
I stocked up yesterday, but I've bought some more food for the weekend.
Well, let's discuss this further with Maria Martinez, the cluster delegation chief at the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Societies. She's joining us from Antananarivo. Maria, the cyclone is getting closer to the island. What is the situation on the ground right now and how are people reacting?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you. The Malagasy Red Cross Society, alongside the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, teams are in the ground, coordinating directly with the BNJRC, which is the National Disaster Management Office. Our teams are assessing the situation in the districts of Ricaville and Batomandri, which are part of the Atsinanana region, the region most likely to be hit by the cyclone. The latest forecast indicates that Batsirai is expected to make landfall between Mahanoro and Manandari. However, the Batomandri district remains very vulnerable due to its proximity to the ocean, and houses are located in low areas close to the sea. Today at 10 a.m., we received the latest information from the meteorological services here in Madagascar, and Batsirai is positioned at 211 kilometers per hour towards the east of Nosibarica. So that's the situation at the moment.
Well, Maria, aid agencies and the UN say the cyclone could have a significant humanitarian impact on the island. What is being done, though, to try and minimize this impact on the people there?
Indeed, the situation doesn't look very encouraging. Approximately 2.8 million people are at risk, and those likely to be directly impacted is estimated at almost 100,000, of which 150,000 people are expected to be displaced. Our teams have been coordinating since the preparedness for Tropical Storm Anna, and since early this week, preparing for Cyclone Batsirai. The response is being led by the BNJRC, and the Red Cross, the Malagasy Red Cross Society, is closely coordinating all the preparedness and response efforts. We have mobilized volunteers from Malagasy Red Cross as well as an IFRC team, and they have been sensitizing families and communities to evacuate from unsafe areas through the early warning system. Accommodation sites have been identified and prepared by the Red Cross in coordination with the government. Since yesterday, I can confirm that 240 people have been already occupying 10 of those accommodation sites identified. The Red Cross has prepositioned stocks in 2 of our warehouses in the country, one of which is in Atsinanana, near the districts to be directly impacted.
All right, Maria Martinez from the International Federation of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent Society is joining us there from Antananarivo. African leaders have gathered in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to tackle several issues at the African Union Summit. Top of the agenda is the spate of coups and attempted coups in West Africa, as well as the pandemic and problems posed by climate change. In the last 19 months, 3 coups have taken place in the region. The latest one was in Burkina Faso, which led to the country's suspension from the African Union. Leaders will also tackle issues like the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. Several heads of state are set to attend the summit. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has already addressed the 35th ordinary session of the African Union Assembly. For more on this, let's cross over to CGTN's Girum Chala. He's in Addis Ababa at the African Union headquarters. Girum, the heads of state are meeting in the backdrop of several coups and the COVID-19 pandemic on the continent still raging. What's the latest from that meeting?
So, Beatrice, as you've said, the 35th Assembly of the Union is now underway. On the opening ceremony, Musa Faki Mohammed, chairperson of the African Union Commission, also Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and many others have delivered their speech. Antonio Guterres of the United Nations Secretary General also delivered his speech, recorded speech from the UN headquarters. Now, in general terms, as you've said, peace and security is the main issue here. Coup d'etats are now expanding across the continent. Conflict, including here in Ethiopia, Somalia, and other places, are also a worrying factor for the continent. Despite the fact that the theme of this year's summit is in relation with resilience, food security, nutrition, and other things, unfortunately, peace and security is still the main issue for the continent. And all leaders have been saying that Africa needs to stand united, work together so that silencing the guns can be a reality in the continent at the same time. There is also this issue of reform in the UN Security Council that has been raised for a long time. And one of the demands that Africa has is at least 2 seats in the UN Security Council. When that institution is mostly talking about African issues, Africa is not represented so far. So Africa is now reiterating its request of joining the UN Security Council and getting 2 seats, at least permanent seats, that is. The Antonio Guterres, in general terms, UN Secretary General, supports the African stand, and he promised that he wants to work with the continent. So the summit has continued. There are different agenda items on the tables of these leaders who are meeting for the next 2 days, Beatrice.
Gerum, so what solutions are being proposed to some of these crises, particularly the coups on the continent?
So the rule of law and respecting individual states' constitutional order has been said time and again here. As I said earlier, the African Union is pretty much worried about every development in the continent, especially the issue of coup d'etat, which is mounting by the day. And it is saying that without a constitutional transition of power, without constitutional order, the African Union will always stand against such moves, wherever they are happening. As you know, there is a law, the governance and administrative rule that all member states have signed, which directly rejects any unconstitutional change of government or grabbing power by force. So African Union has been rejecting these things for a long time. It's been sanctioning member states, dismembering them or banning them from membership and other things. But critics, Beatrice, tell you that the African Union must do more than criticizing or banning member nations or sanctioning them. It needs to come up with an organized way of tackling this kind of moves, which are unconstitutional change of government, before they take over the constitutional and democratic order of the continent itself. So we have to wait and hear from the member nations who are assembling here at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Beatrice, for them to come up with a permanent, strong solution that can perhaps try to avoid such unconstitutional change of government from happening here in the continent, Beatrice.
Gerum Chala for us there at the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa. Well, let's now head to Mali, where thousands of anti-French protesters took to the streets of the capital Bamako on Friday, waving Russian flags and burning cardboard cutouts of French President Emmanuel Macron. They were celebrating the expulsion of France's envoy in Bamako. Mali expelled the French ambassador last week over what the country's transitional government described as hostile and outrageous comments by France. Relations between Mali and its former colonizer have turned acrimonious after the junta reneged on a promise to organize elections in February and proposed holding power until 2025. In Guinea-Bissau, President Umaro Sissoco Embalo has visited the government palace in the capital, Bissau, where 11 people were killed in a failed coup attempt. Embalo toured the compound's scene of attack, surrounded by heavy security. According to the government, the attackers intended to assassinate the president and were part of a well-funded and tightly planned plot. President Embalo says the attack is being investigated by the public prosecutor.
There are people who died. We haven't even had their funerals yet. This is not a joke. The case is already with the public prosecutor's office, which is responsible for the criminal investigations. Justice will be done with transparency. There are people who are financed by these drug trade groups, which is not my case. Now, my fight against corruption and drug trafficking will only intensify.
Let's now head to China, where a welcome banquet has been held for world leaders attending the Beijing Winter Olympics. Chinese President Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan hosted dignitaries at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. President Xi also met separately with his counterparts from countries such as Serbia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Egypt.
China and Serbia are hailing what they called an ironclad friendship. The Chinese president says they enjoy high-level political trust and bilateral ties have withstood the test of time. He says relations have become even stronger and are a model in global relations. The leaders of both countries pledged more cooperation in fields such as infrastructure, trade, and healthcare. In his meeting with Kazakh President Tokayev, Xi said a safe, stable, and prosperous Kazakhstan is in the common interest of both countries. He said China firmly supports Kazakhstan in safeguarding its independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. For his part, Tokayev says the Central Asian country hopes to deepen cooperation under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and looks forward to Xi's visit. In talks with Turkmenistan's president, Xi Jinping called for deepened beneficial cooperation on all fronts and building more substantial, vibrant, and dynamic bilateral ties. A China-Egypt community was mentioned in Xi's talks with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. They agreed on continued collaboration on COVID vaccine equity, accessibility, and affordability for developing countries. These meetings are held against the backdrop of the Beijing Winter Olympics, where high-level representatives from over 24 countries, regions, and organizations are in attendance. Li Jingyi, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. More than 20,000 refugee flee clashes in northwestern Ethiopia. The United Nations says over 20,000 Sudanese and South Sudanese have fled clashes in northwestern Ethiopia. Fighting broke out in the town of Tongo between federal forces and armed groups on January the 18th. The UNHCR spokesperson says a refugee camp near the town was looted and burnt. This was in addition to another camp being looted and torched in late December. The refugees have since fled to Asosa town. Regional authorities have identified a new temporary site which can accommodate 20,000 people. The UNHCR says it is working to get the site ready to receive refugees.
Fighting broke out on the 18th of January in the town of Tongo, reportedly between unidentified armed groups and federal forces. And the nearby camp hosting 10,300 refugees was looted and burned. This followed the looting of another camp in the area in late December. A total of 22,000 people in both camps have been cut off from access and assistance since then. Of course, we're deeply concerned that we're not able to reach everyone at this time. We're trying to resume aid as soon as possible, but for that to happen, we need to see the humanitarian security situation, the humanitarian access and the security situation improving rapidly, and that is partially our call.
Landmines planted during the war in South Sudan between 1983 and 2005 still pose a threat to many in the country. That's according to the United Nations, which says also landmines are derailing agricultural development in most parts of the country. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
Mary Joseph is a 20-year-old mother of one, a resident of Juba's outskirts. Mary lost a leg after stepping on a landmine 2 years ago.
I was coming from cutting grass for roofing our hut. I was returning home, then I heard a loud sound. I don't remember a lot of things, but I found myself down. There was a lot of blood and I didn't have one of my legs.
The United Nations says 1,404 people across South Sudan have been killed by unexploded ammunition from 2004 to date. The UN says all 10 states of South Sudan have reported mine-related injuries and deaths. More than 3,700 others have been injured by the devices. Landmines continue to hinder movement, dissuade investors, and frighten returning refugees. The mining is expensive. The UN says it continues to fund agencies involved in the mining, providing mine risk education and also victim assistance. The UN estimates that 80% of the most dangerous areas are now mine-free. 96% of the roads identified as contaminated have been cleared, but the global body says more work needs to be done and it is calling for more funds.
We need for families to return to their areas where they live prior to the conflict. We need for agriculture to continue in areas where we know that we have the land, the water, and the people to be able to produce food to feed themselves and reduce food insecurity. Overall, it's about safety. It's about creating an enabling environment for people to be able to live and to thrive.
UN mine workers are detonating a number of unexploded ordnances in the country, but civilians like Mary Joseph still come across unexploded devices, and the unlucky ones lose their lives. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
A group of lawmakers from the northeast of the Democratic Republic of Congo is calling on their government to authorize troops from neighboring Uganda to help their army fight against militiamen in Ituri province. Their call comes in the wake of an attack at a camp for internally displaced people that left more than 60 civilians dead and several others injured in Jugu territory. CGTN caught up with the head of the parliamentary group in the DRC's capital, Kinshasa.
Nous sommes choqués.
We are very shocked by the recent killings in Ituri province. We just do not understand what is going on. We are requesting President Felix Tshisekedi to reconsider his decision regarding the appointment of the commanders handling the military operation against armed groups there. Nothing has changed since they took charge last year. We propose that our government authorizes troops from neighboring Uganda to help our army to get rid of the rebels in our territory.
Meanwhile, dozens of Congolese families are mourning the death of their relatives who were electrocuted by a power cable that collapsed in a market in the capital of the DRC on Wednesday. The tragic accident claimed 26 lives. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa sent us this report from Kinshasa.
Kinshasa residents are struggling to come to terms with the recent death of their friends and relatives. 26 people were electrocuted by a power cable that fell into a ditch filled with water on Wednesday. Cecile Nzumba is one of the survivors.
I heard a very loud sound when I was selling vegetables here. I was with some kids who usually help me, and they asked me what that sound was. I told them it was from the electric cables. Shortly after, we saw some of my colleagues running towards us, shouting that 4 people had already died.
The accident occurred after a heavy downpour.
This is Matadi Kibala Market, where the high-voltage cable fell and killed 26 people in Kinshasa on Wednesday. Most of the victims were women who have left their families mourning.
This family is grieving Sandra Mapendo. She was 30 years old and has left 4 little children.
I got married to her a few years ago. It's very sad to be separated from her. She left home in the morning to go to work, and then I got a call that she had died. It's very unfortunate.
I've really lost a precious child. She used to bring me so much joy. She always supported me financially whenever I was in need.
The DRC government has promised to foot the burial costs for all the victims and build a better market for the survivors.
I would like to express the government's condolences to all the families of the accident victims on behalf of the President. We've got instructions to build a better market for the survivors in a safe area.
Kinshasa is a city of about 15 million people with many informal settlements built near high-voltage electricity lines. Disasters are common, especially during the rainy season, but they have left families of the accident victims in agony because their loved ones are no more. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Tanzanians joined the celebrations to mark the start of the Beijing 2022 Winter Games in China.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And we continue our coverage of the Beijing 2022 Olympics that got underway in China on Friday. Tanzanians joined the celebrations that marked the colorful start of the Winter Games. The Chinese embassy invited officials such as the Minister for Sport and the President of the Tanzanian Paralympic Committee to witness the grand occasion. They all watched the opening ceremony of the 2022 Olympic Games, beamed live from Beijing. Tanzania is not sending athletes to the Games, but the event allowed participants to get into the Olympic spirit.
I wish all the best and success to the people of China who are hosting this event.
I wish them good competitions. I believe everything will go well.
Meanwhile, Olympic team leaders from the U.S. have said they have not issued any warnings to their athletes about expressing themselves during the Beijing Winter Olympics.
You know, we didn't issue warnings. We didn't issue proclamations. We simply provided information to them and explained that, you know, whether laws of a country or cultures or norms of a country or the environment that we find ourselves in. The Olympic Games is a time for us to come together in the spirit of sportsmanship and the Olympic values. And we, you know, we promote that with real sincerity.
In football news, African champions Al Ahly kick off their FIFA Club World Cup campaign when they take on CONCACAF winners Monterrey of Mexico later Saturday. The Egyptian Red Devils will be missing 6 of their players who are with the national team at the 2021 AFCON in Cameroon. Odds are stacked against them in their quest to be the first team from the continent to lift the title. CGTN's Adam Mahroe brings us more.
10-time CAF Champions League winners Al Ahly begin their latest quest to win the FIFA Club World Cup for the first time. But the odds are severely stuck against them. The Cairo Giants are rocked by injuries, COVID-19 infections, and will be missing 6 of their best players who are with Egypt at the AFCON. In all, the Red Devils will be without 14 players in the UAE after being forced to travel for the competition without a full senior squad.
Al Ahly goes to the competition with a 23-player squad. To compensate for this shortage, most of the team is youth talent. Few are new players rising for the first time in an international competition, and the rest are players who haven't played in a match in a long while. So the team that won the CAF Champions League and qualified to the Club World Cup is not playing in the competition.
Al Ahly has no strikers. They are missing 2 midfielders. They have no top goalkeeper because Shenawi got injured with the national team in Cameroon. In addition, Mosimane got infected with COVID-19, so even the head coach is missing the clash against Monterrey.
Al Ahly's opening game in the competition is against Mexico and CONCACAF champions Monterrey Rayados. They have lost their 2 previous encounters against the same opponents, and that was with the senior squad. This third meeting gets even more complicated. Monterrey head coach Javier Aguirre is an expert in Egyptian football.
This could be the toughest match Al Ahly has ever played. They have players who have never appeared before in the Club World Cup. Monterrey's coach is Javier Aguirre, who coached the Egyptian national team. He knows Egyptian football well and has definitely followed Al Ahly more than any other team in Egypt.
All odds are clearly against Al Ahly. The team playing in Abu Dhabi this weekend got defeated 3-0 in their last domestic appearance. The Egyptian Red Devils need a miracle to overcome logic and win their first FIFA Club World Cup match this weekend. Expectations are so low that a 1-0 defeat will be considered an achievement. These are not the usual hopes for one of the most trophy-decorated teams in the world. But it is the price the club is paying for prioritizing national interests in the AFCON because FIFA disregarded Africa's football calendar. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And we leave it there on this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contact on your screen and do follow us on our digital media platforms. Thank you for watching. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. From me and the team here on Africa Live, bye-bye and stay safe.